carry. Hey everyone, we are on the last expansion of the Talisman, and that is the Cataclysm Expansion that I got right here. And, well, as you can very obviously see, things have quite drastically changed for us here for this last expansion. Because now, we are playing on an entirely separate board that is completely different. Everything you thought you might have known about Talisman completely changes with the Cataclysm. Because the whole theme of the Cataclysm is that there was a alternate timeline to where the world essentially had come to an end and destruction of all civilization as we know it completely ceases. But now people are starting to return and we're starting to rebuild civilization. But as you can see by some of the spaces just in this immediate camera shot, things have started to change. Places that you thought were familiar are now long gone, and that sort of thing. So first, as always, I'm going to cover the characters that come with the Cataclysm, and there are 5 of them. First, we have the Barbarian. We have the Scavenger. We have the Arcane Scion. And you might have seen him in every single one of our tutorial videos where the Black Knight space was. Well, now, Black Knight is an actual character that you can play as. And then lastly, probably the craziest looking figure that we've got, pretty much in the entirety of Talisman, we've got ourselves a mutant. Look at all that crazy that's going on with him. All those little tentacles and claws and all the crazy that's happening with him here. So, the next thing that we've got is the 4 brand new alternate endings. Not 3 like the ones that we're used to, but now we move up to 4. We've got the Eternal Crown, which is the default ending for the Cataclysm. Essentially meaning that whenever we start the game, of course I'm going to get into more details because there's a lot more setup that goes into the Cataclysm board, but the Eternal Crown is the default ending, meaning that this card stays face up, so that way it is treated sort of like a revealed ending, as it is the default conditions for this brand new board. We've also got the revealed the 1 Talisman ending, and if you don't remember from previous videos, revealed endings are indicated by this star in the top left hand corner, meaning that this card sits face up in the middle of the board. Everyone gets to know the conditions and the strategies that they want to implement within their own play style in order to meet the requirements to win the game. We also have this revealed Lands of Wonder ending. And lastly, we've got the hidden ending, the Cult of the Damned. If you don't remember, hidden endings are indicated by the moons up in the very top, so any expansions that you include that have that symbol, you shuffle them all together, and then picked at random, the card sits face down in the middle. And the first player to get to the Crown of Command reveals the ending, and then works on the conditions, basically adding a bit of mystery towards the entirety of your gaming experience. Next, we've also got 47 brand new adventure cards that get merged into the adventure deck. We've got 10 spell cards that get merged into the spell deck respectively. We've got 10 terrain cards, if you remember these from my Harbinger and Firelands videos. We've also got 24 purchase cards. Now you might have seen these in our base game. And as you can see here through some of the items have changed, but you might see some familiar stuff too, like the psychic crystal from the city, or even the bow. There's a whole ton of brand new purchase deck items that get merged with the initial purchase deck in the base game. There are also 6 brand new Warlock quest cards, just like we have the Warlock's quest cards inside of the Reaper and the Frostmarch expansion. We've also got, here's some of the brand new stuff that comes with the Cataclysm. We've got 25 Remnant cards. I'll explain how all these work. And also another new concept that comes with the Cataclysm, we've got 40 Denizen cards. Lastly, we have 6 new Talisman cards. And unlike before, when the talismans were just talismans that you needed to get to the middle, all of these talismans have different abilities that are added on top of being able to enable you to get to the Crown of Command through the Valley of Fire. Now remember, just like with any other expansion that we previously covered, if you only want to play with portions of the Cataclysm, maybe you don't want to play with everything that's going crazy, you can only use the 5 characters and or the 4 alternate ending cards, if portions is something that you're mostly interested in. When it comes to the actual setup of the board, this is the entirety of Cataclysm and what it looks like when the board is completely unfolded. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on here. But first things first, these Remnant cards are the first order of business of what comes out. On certain space locations, as you can see this symbol here, for every symbol that's on that space, they each get a Remnant card. So we've got one here for the graveyard. We've got one at the Hidden Valley. We've got one over there at the Crags. We've got one over here at the Hills. We've got 2 at the Ruins. Just sit there. We've got 1 so far as the Plane of Peril. We've got 1 on the plains on this side and on the hills on this side. We've got 1 in the desert. We've also got 1 at the Cursed Glade. And we got 1 at the Ruins. And they all just sit face down like this, all over the board. Then, as per usual, we merge our Cataclysm adventure deck with the respective adventure deck that you're incorporating. Of course, you need the base game adventure deck cards in order to play this, even though we're switching to an entirely different board with different spaces. And then, of course, we merge the 10 spell cards also into the spell deck. And then the same also goes for these purchase cards for the purchase deck. Now, because the theme of the Cataclysm is that spaces change, there's a lot of different things that go alongside the Cataclysm itself. So, if you don't remember from our Harbinger and Firelands videos, there are now terrain cards that also exist. This is just an example of one of the many terrain cards that are inside of the Cataclysm. Because the theme is that this is the wastelands, this is the fallout of everything that's happened since the Cataclysm hit Talisman, civilization is still trying to rebuild itself, so spaces might change and ebb and flow. So, like with the Harbinger and the Firelands, if a terrain card is placed on a space, all the text that's at the bottom with the fields is completely ignored, and you only focus on the text that's on this highway card, because it's no longer the fields. And it's the same process for if the highway was built onto the Sentinel, there's no longer a Sentinel there, so you can cross into the middle region without any obstructions. And it's the same if it's placed on the Portal of Power, in which there is no Portal of Power there, and you can cross from the middle region to the inner region with ease. So now moving on to the actual movement of the Cataclysm. So it's still treated like regular Talisman in regards to your movement and encounter, but what happens if you decide to land on any of these spaces that have these Remnant cards? So when you land, let's say we're going to the graveyard here, we roll the 1, we reveal whatever the Remnant card is. It might be an object, it might be an event or sort of thing. It's kind of like its own separate adventure deck, but these are more so to the effect any lost treasures since the Cataclysm hit. So since this is an object, we can choose to take this, and then this ends the turn, because there's nothing else left. Whenever the Remnant cards are taken, they're essentially choosing whether you encounter the space or not. So once you have taken the Remnant card off the board, if Remnant cards are ever discarded, because there are some Remnant cards that display events or places or even strangers, those get thrown into the discard pile. That's exactly into the adventure deck. So those get merged right in, and then those can be shuffled, and they can come back into the game. But as you can probably see, if we come over here to the village, remember how in the village there was the village mystic, or there was the armory, or the doctor that was healing? Because of the Cataclysm, people are starting to disappear. Things are starting to become a lot more scarce. So those spaces no longer work that way. And that's why these denizen cards start to come into play. The graveyard is also one of those spaces that requires the denizens after the fact. And the way that denizens work is that they are not like adventure cards, meaning that an unlimited amount of denizens can occupy a space at a time. So let's say we draw the first denizen card, and here's just an example of one of them. So the bard here, you can see the text at the top where it says City, Tavern, Village. You choose whether to interact. Of course, with this one, you roll, and then you consult this chart here on whatever happens to you. But because none of these match the space that's right next to us with the graveyard, this card gets discarded. Any denizens who happen to match the specific place, like this gravedigger here, because it says graveyard right underneath, then that denizen card stays for the entirety of the game. Also, as a note that I almost completely forgot to mention, back with the terrain cards, if for whatever reason, back to our highway example, let's say that that graveyard gets transformed into a highway, then all denizens that have been occupied there come off the board and are discarded. There are some cards that exist inside of the Cataclysm adventure deck to where sometimes a terrain card will get removed, and if that terrain card has denizens on top of it, then it also goes with it. So you want to be sure that whatever you change or things that might change back, certain denizens might not be available to you. And these denizens can be very helpful to you depending on certain situations and circumstances to where their abilities might become more useful to you. However, there are denizens inside of these denizen deck. And as you can see here at the top where it says any, if any of those happen to pop up on either the graveyard, the village, tavern, city, the chapel, or the castle, then that means that those denizens don't get discarded. And that things like the wagoner, for example, it will have a bottom layer of text to tell you what to do after you use them. And that sometimes they'll move to very specific spaces, or they'll just simply get reshuffled back into the denizen deck. Now, because of the brand new talismans that I showed earlier, I can try to make that very clear for you guys. The talismans now, along with the base game, get shuffled into a face-down deck. So when you go to the Warlock's Cave, which is now on that side, and you pick your Warlock's Quest, which now, because it is the Cataclysm, because things have changed, if you have the Cataclysm quest cards alongside a mixture of the Reaper Warlock's Quest or the Frostmarch Warlock's Quest, it now becomes its own separate deck. Instead of being able to turn these face up and being able to pick which one, you have to pick whatever's on top after you've shuffled them. Same with the talismans whenever you gain a talisman via the Warlock's Cave. These get shuffled up, and whatever comes out on top is the talisman that you get. Because sometimes it might be a normal talisman, or it might have benefits or a curse, that sort of thing. So far we have covered the denizens and how they can randomly appear every now and then, and how they can be removed when the terrain changes with the terrain cards. We talked about how the remnant cards that are all over the board here might provide certain resources to you as you're trying to accumulate your strength and craft as usual. And the overall objective of the Cataclysm is still the same. Like I said, this Eternal Crown alternate ending is the default ending of the Cataclysm. So this is what sits face up whenever you start the game. But overall, the Talisman experience doesn't really change too drastically in regards to fundamental rules. There's just a lot of nuances to the game that you can realize that the Cataclysm isn't the same as the vanilla game board that we saw. That spaces have changed in ways that strategies are going to have to be revamped. And taking advantage of these remnant cards and the variety of characters, denizens, quests, remnants, and that sort of thing is something that you want to strategize for. Like most of the other expansions, we still have trinkets, as you can see here. Trinkets, if you don't remember, mean that they are objects that don't count towards your carrying capacity. So you can have an unlimited number of trinkets that you can either find or buy that you can carry. Also, just to show you one of the enemy examples in the Cataclysm, and just to show you how things have changed, is this junk golem here that has a question mark for strength. It's definitely one of the odder ones, but as you can see here as you're reading, it's all condition based on how strong that this guy is going to be. The strength is equal to the number of objects held by all characters. So if you're in the late game and this guy comes up where a lot of people have a lot of objects, you could have a total of 30 strength for this junk golem, or even higher depending on how much loot other players have. And then there's also the reward of taking an object of your choice as well. So there is definitely enough changes inside of the Cataclysm to where it's noticeable. And even though this is its own expansion, the four corners of the woodlands, the highlands, the city, and the dungeon are compatible with this board. Every other expansion that we've previously covered is compatible with the Cataclysm. You merge it all the same way that you would with the base game, but the main thing is all these denizen cards and all the new stuff that the Cataclysm offers is just placed on this board instead. So overall, hopefully this board in specific can provide enough challenges, because again, there's a significant amount of changes to where you know that this isn't the same board, but a lot of the basic mechanics still remain the same. And this concludes our tutorial video as far as the expansions that we've covered, all 14 of them. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you to everything that you guys have done, and of all the views and that sort of thing. And then hopefully, especially when I get to play with Carrie, that all 14 of these videos can provide enough insight to where you can decide which expansions you want to pick and choose from, and kind of customize your own Talisman experience, because part of the experience of Talisman is uncovering the mysteries of the different expansions, being able to stumble upon things that wouldn't otherwise normally happen, and the unpredictability of it all. So I encourage every one of you who's brand new to Talisman to find whichever expansions interest you the most. Find the ones that can help you change it up if you've been playing the vanilla game for a long time, to where you can still have fun and create different kinds of adventures each time, because that's the beauty of this game, is that you're never going to play exactly how you did every single time. So thanks again, guys. In this next series that I'm going to be developing, I'm going to start going into the bit more depth of the actual characters themselves and kind of get an idea of the bigger picture as far as the element you can control. Because honestly, I want to say that this game is about 60% random and 40% strategy. So being able to control the strategy portion of Talisman will definitely be very useful in being able to conquer this game and being able to compete against other players. But other than that, see you guys